G'day there. You're watching the Aussie BIM Guru, and today I've got a quick video just to discuss a few things people have been asking me about recently in relation to Autodesk. Rather than hoping that you'll just watch me bash things on Twitter, I thought I'd just make a quick video to talk about them. The first is the rebrand. I'm not really going to talk about it very long. You can see the logo here. Personally, I don't think it's a great logo, but hopefully it works with their new branding vision. I'm not really that fussed what it looks like. But I guess we will get a new Revit logo, right? So that's one benefit. But the other thing I wanted to talk about today is Autodesk Flex. In this case, flexible licensing. Now, at the moment, Flex is an option, which is great. So I actually don't think it's a bad thing. I see a lot of people sort of jumping on and bashing Autodesk about it. It is more expensive, I'll be honest. The payoff period for using Flex like a normal subscription to Autodesk is definitely not there. So in this case, we can do a quick comparison just to see the difference of using it. Now, before I dive straight in and sort of treat this like a strict comparison, it's important to note that Flex is an option for how you pay for software. So it's not actually just a comparable price entirely to subscribing to software itself. I see a lot of people saying it's so much more expensive, and it's like, yeah, sure, this probably isn't targeted at people that actually use the products on a daily or at least a weekly basis. It might be for a student that wants to access a program temporarily that's not currently studying. Or it might just be someone that wants to try out the software for a little bit longer than a trial period with less strings attached. So I think it is great for that. Now the prices are a little bit challenging. So in this case, currently, at the time of recording this, Revit is 10 tokens a day, AutoCAD I think is 7, and Navisworks is 9. They're the main programs that I use. I think 3ds Max was 6, and Fusion was 2 tokens. So tokens are a bit of a challenging concept for me, mainly because they're not a monetary object. They're something that the value of can be changed independently of money. So I'm not necessarily all on board with the concept of tokens, and there is one issue that really needs to be discussed with tokens. So obviously having a flexible license is great because you can just buy the tokens and use them when you need them. Well, not quite. There's a bit of a catch. So this should be a good alternative to annual subscriptions, right? Well, the tokens only last a year as well. Why? It makes no sense to me. I mean, they're obviously trying to regulate their market, so they don't find firms that go and buy like 10 million tokens on day one and then never buy them again once they raise the price. But to me, it indicates Autodesk will raise the price of these tokens. They will creep up over time if it works, and they'll creep down if it doesn't. So that is a little bit of a red flag for me, at least initially looking at the system. So I've done a little bit of quick maths just to compare how this weighs up. Now currently I pay roughly $4,000 a year for the AEC collection. Yes, that seems like a lot of money, but as a consultant I turn around a lot more money using it and can offset that easily 30-fold plus easily. It's probably more than that again. So I'm not really that worried about paying that much for software. It gives me a lot of money in return. Yes, it is expensive, but there are programs out there that are more expensive and in my opinion do less. So this isn't really going to be like a Revit bashing video per se. I've got other videos where I talk about the problems with it, so feel free to go watch them. Anyway, let's assume that I work for 48 weeks in the year of the 52. I'm a bit of a workaholic, I'll be honest. And of those, I work 5 days during those weeks. Now, often I will turn on Revit on the weekend and use it to solve a problem. If someone sends me a request on the forums, on Dynamo or something like that, or maybe I'm producing my YouTube videos, but let's just say I'm a normal person working Monday to Friday and that's it. So in this case, if I do operate programs such as Revit, Navisworks and AutoCAD, it's important to think about how often I actually use those programs. Now, pretty much every day that I'm working in software, I'm usually dealing with Revit. So let's just assume that I'm loading my time entirely with Revit. With AutoCAD, I probably need it roughly a quarter of the time. I only really use it to process CAD files for the most part. So very occasionally, I'll need to open it and use it specifically, but probably only a quarter of the year. Navisworks, I barely use it these days. I use a lot of other offerings. I've tried out things like Revisto and things like that, so I probably really only use Navisworks maybe 15% of the year at the most, I'll be honest. So if I add all those up, I've done a bit of maths. I'll just double check the numbers, but in this case, I think I ended up with about around about 3,000 tokens if I do the maths on that. And 3,000 tokens is roughly $11,000 to $12,000 a year. So obviously, when I compare the AEC collection to using Flex tokens, it's not really a viable alternative. The break-even point is roughly 4 months. So if you know that you're going to use the software for very specific periods of time, maybe it's going to be more equitable for you. But if you're ever going to exceed more than 4 months of usage on a few platforms, I would say that you're probably better off in this case dealing with a subscription. But that sort of leads me to my final point about the Flex system. And this final point is what the Flex system might represent for the vision of Autodesk and licensing in the future. Now, I remember a time not so long ago when subscription was an option. We could work with perpetual licenses, and I'm not saying perpetual licenses were perfect. I'm not even saying they're cheaper than subscriptions. There have been a lot of studies that show when you add it all up, sometimes subscriptions can actually be cheaper if you manage the quantity of them effectively versus holding perpetual seats. But I guess the point is that while something might appear optional at first, and Autodesk might tell us it's optional, maybe the Flex system is their goal for how they're going to license way down the line in the future. And I must say, if the prices hold, it's not going to be sustainable for a lot of companies using Revit and other similar platforms. So I do hope that Autodesk isn't actually planning on making this their standard system. Now, I know there's some big companies that Autodesk already works with using Flex token systems. I won't say who they are, but I have got inside scoop before that there are alternative methods of licensing and payment that Autodesk does use with larger clients, usually just to better suit their usage patterns or their habits, and make the software a little bit more sustainable for them to use in the long term. And it makes sense. A lot of businesses do work that way. Their biggest clients do get alternative payment methods or enterprise solutions, as you might call them. But I guess for the average user, say someone like me that's just a one-off business, paying 3 times what a normal cost is of a program obviously just wouldn't be anywhere near as sustainable. I'd still make a profit, but far out an extra 8,000 would be a big kick in the pants. So I think that if this is the future of their licensing approach, then there might be some trouble ahead. Having said that, every time Autodesk has switched to a token system for one of their services, usually the service hasn't done very well and competitors have emerged and taken over that service. For example, cloud rendering. How many people use cloud rendering these days? I must say I don't. I mean, we didn't really use rendering in Revit anyway for the most part. We usually went to 3D Max. 3D Max is pretty dead at this point as well, and I must say most people seem to be using Unreal, Enscape, Lumion, all those offerings, and they really emerged on the back of the fact that no one really wanted to use cloud credits or the cloud rendering service. So maybe that's going to happen with this software if they ever try to make that move with the Flex system as well. At the same time too, there's other things that people don't really use, like illuminance studies, that they haven't changed for years, and I don't know anyone that uses that. We mostly use Ladybug and Grasshopper, and as a result, alternative industry approaches and standards have emerged. So I guess, obviously Autodesk hasn't said they're going to change the system, so I'm just thinking ahead here. So don't take this as the fact that they will. They might not, for all I know. But if they do, it's a good and a bad thing. It encourages people to move to other solutions if this one isn't cost beneficial for them. I'm sure a lot of companies could still sustainably support the use of Revit if it was 3 times as expensive, but it would suck, obviously. So just some considerations on the system, and overall it's a good alternative, but hopefully it just stays an alternative. That's sort of my verdict on it. So that's sort of my thoughts. I'm keen to hear what other people might think about it as well. And again, I want to reinforce, this isn't an Autodesk bashing video. It's just thinking ahead as to what this might represent for their business strategy. I think it's always pays to think about these things, especially when you're investing in a company or a platform from a business perspective, because you're going to lock yourself in to some degree, right? I mean, God knows we're all pretty locked in at the architecture firms these days to Revit. Anyway, if you're not already following and subscribing, feel free to do so. And I look forward to making more videos in future like this one. Thanks. Take care. Bye.